Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is a practical training podcast with yours truly at Real Mike Bell. This podcast is brought to you by the practical training professionals out here in Southern Maryland. Guys, today's episode is going to be part of our 50 and 50 series. We're reaching out to Minnesota today to talk to Mark Ehlen. Mark is certified instructor. He's been doing this for quite a few years here, and we want to pick his brain and figure out what it is that makes him tick and why he continues to be out there on the front teaching these awesome classes. So, guys, with that, let's not waste any time. Let's bring in Mr. Mark today. Hey, Mark, how you doing, man?
I am doing very good, thank you.
All right, guys, so you don't know this, but we just experienced some technical difficulties, and Mark was way into a pretty awesome story there, and I don't know what happened. The power went out or something, but we're back, and hopefully we can save it. So let's start back at the top here real quick, Mark. So, and sorry, you're going to have to apologize, but the good thing is that you've already rehearsed it, so now we shouldn't have any of those uhs and ums. So here we go. So, Mark, first of all, what made you get into the firearms industry?
Well, to go back to the beginning, I grew up in a hunting family. I grew up with family that worked for Federal Cartridge, and so I've been around firearms my whole life. As soon as I was old enough, I got into hunter safety training, and then hunted with my uncles and my father out in the field. So this was something that's been around my family, my life, my whole time. So it wasn't anything new. What got me into instruction was after the second Obama inauguration, I noticed people in my church buying firearms en masse. And I, of course, as an interest of mine, I was talking to them about it, and I began to figure out real quickly that most of them didn't have the slightest idea what they were doing. They had no clue about safety, storage, where to get training, where to get help, and unfortunately, most guys tend to think they can all shoot, drive a stick, and back of a trailer. And the truth is, we all can if we have some instruction, but these guys weren't doing it. So I approached my church leadership and asked if I could start a group on this to try to get some folks together and help get started, point them in the right direction. And it quickly grew to over 200 people. And so as this began to go on for a while, I realized that I should have some instruction myself. So I'm pretty quickly reaching the limits of what I know. So I sought the training, became a certified USPCA instructor, and then became certified also with the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension as well. So I've got that in place as well. And then once you do that sort of thing, you like to teach, you need insurance. Insurance requires a business. Business requires a website. So here we go. I've got a training business now.
You're all in at that point, weren't you?
I'm all in at this point, and I'm having a great time because I didn't realize how much I was going to enjoy standing in front of a class and teaching this stuff.
Oh, very cool. So you said what was it? Your uncle or your great uncle was part of a Federal Cartridge. Is that right?
My great uncle was vice president of Federal Cartridge during the war. Nice.
So yeah, you probably were. I don't know. Do you guys have any cool wall hangings, if you will, old casings or anything like that?
There's a few mementos hanging around.
So very cool. I gotta ask. So Minnesota gets cold, right? Also, let me ask you. So you are just outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right, and I know it gets cold up there. So I got to ask you. We're in Southern Maryland, so we do have a winter, more of a winter than I had when I lived in Arizona, but not like the winters I've seen like in Iowa and other places like that. So when weather is a factor, what are your busiest months of the year out there in Minnesota for you?
Actually, it's probably September through about April, because what happens here is the summers, we all think they're too short. And so people don't want to spend time sitting in a classroom as much during the summer as they do during the winter and the fall and stuff. So I generally take the summers off unless I get enough of an interest to put one together, and then start up in the fall, run through the winter into the spring. And it's just tough to get people to sit in a classroom for 6+ hours during a Saturday in the middle of the summer.
Okay, roger that. Yeah, and that makes sense. I personally don't want to be in a classroom either. So we generally, if possible, we try to get our outdoor type trainings in over the summer like that when it's not too hot, right? Of course, because, clients want to be comfortable, right? So, so what kind of firearms classes are you instructing out there?
I am doing exclusively concealed carry classes at this point. That's where the real demand is, and those are the easiest students to get at this time. And there's just so much with all of the things that have happened here in the last year. There's so many people lining up to do this. It's just almost unbelievable.
Understood. Now, Minnesota is one of those states that has reciprocity with multiple different jurisdictions. Is that right? I think what is the number today?
I think it might be up to 30.
Yeah, I think it is. It's 30 something, right? So even if you're listening and you don't live in Minnesota, if you live near Minnesota, check your state law or reach out to Mark here, and he might be able to tell you if you bounce across the border into Minnesota and take one of his classes, you might be covered where you live. But don't quote me on that. Get a hold of Mark or get a hold of somebody near you to answer that question. But that kind of opens up another question for me that I wanted to ask you. And this is kind of a fundamental. This is one of the fundamental questions I want to get through. If you look at all of the different stuff, I mean, at the end of the day, right, after the Revolutionary War and the Constitution was stricken and, all of the amendments kind of fell out and, we are a party of states that are part of a united nation, right, of the United States of America. And each state does have some power, and the power is given to the states. But there are some things that are just federally accepted, like the driver's license. It doesn't really matter where you go. If you have a driver's license in one state, it's pretty much 50-state reciprocity. And one of the arguments that we see, at least out here, and we live very close to D.C., and we're constantly talking about it, all the 2A communities are talking about it, is this concept of national reciprocity. Minnesota, it seems like 30 other states accept your license, and then we do Utah, Arizona, Florida, Virginia, D.C., Maryland, and between that, I think we get somewhere around 37 states that we could train to out here with reciprocity, but there is no 50-state reciprocity. What's your take on that?
Oh, it's necessary immediately right now. Let's do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there's no reason that you should lose your Second Amendment rights because you cross a state line.
No, I agree.
I mean, just like a driver's license, you need to obey the individual traffic laws in that state. Same thing should apply here. You got to understand and obey all of the specific firearm laws, whatever state you go to. But I should be able to carry my gun anywhere I want to go, anywhere in the country, anytime.
That's right.
It's just too much of a possibility of people getting tripped up on some of these oddball things that happen, and then, frankly, in some states they don't even obey federal law. You guys are familiar with that, and so it's just not fair that people take a law-abiding citizen, turn them into a criminal for driving across the state line.
Interesting story about that. So, where we live out here, in Maryland, anytime that you're trying to go north through Maryland, most of the time, depending on the closest route or the quickest route, it'll have you go through Maryland, through D.C., through Virginia, and then back into Maryland. So, and that's all within about 5 minutes. So within about 5 minutes, you've crossed through, it's actually 4 jurisdictions because you've got the federal parks, the federal building, different areas where there's a whole bunch of different laws regulating the carrying of a firearm that you have to navigate when you get through there. And ironically, there is none of that reciprocity here. So, you could be perfectly legal and then 2 steps away be committing a felony. And, the onus of that really, the way that it's structured, right, it really does put the onus of the knowledge onto the individual, which, that's true. And in all cases, it is true, as you mentioned, just like driving, you should be familiar with the state laws. But when they structure the laws so separately and so differently from, 5 feet apart from each other that it's kind of hard to stick up with it. It's kind of hard to stay on top of it. And then Maryland, D.C. actually became a shall issue state, a lot faster, a may issue district. And they are a lot more lenient with issuing firearms in D.C. than they actually are in Maryland, which is crazy. But it's interesting, in D.C., you can't carry a firearm on any federal property, and almost the entirety of D.C. is federal property. So it's kind of a catch-22 there. But yeah, the concept of national reciprocity is something that I believe a lot of people are pushing for, and that, eventually we hope that does become a reality. Another thing that I'm keen on, that I've been keeping an eye on lately, is there's a court that is ruling, there's an appellate court down in the South that is ruling on the constitutionality of the 21-year-old age limit to purchased from an FFL a handgun. And what they're trying to do, they're challenging that down to 18 years old.
It's Florida, and they ruled in favor of that.
Roger. So that's the question that you have to ask, right? Is a 21-year-old more empowered, or should they be allowed to defend themselves, but an 18-year-old can't? Right. And it's a slippery slope. And over the past, I'm 38, almost 39. So I'm old enough to see the transition from, buying cigarettes at 18 to buying it at 21, and buying lottery 18 to buying it at 21. And Mark, you might even have a few more years on me there. You might have seen it a lot more loosey-goosey back in the day than that even. But, the one thing that isn't similar of all of those things is that the right to keep and bear arms is bestowed upon you essentially at 18 years old. Why are they prohibiting people from exercising that right at 18 years old, right? What's your take on that?
Well, the thing is that if you can serve in the military, you can enter into contracts, you can get married, you're essentially an adult in every other way. At 18, there really isn't any reason that you shouldn't be allowed to buy any legal piece of property that the country can sell. I mean, so a handgun is still a gun. You can buy a rifle and a shotgun at 18. Why not a handgun as well?
Yeah, and I don't know. We are actually about to take an 18-year-old kid and walk him through the entire process of applying for his HQL, which is a handgun qualification license. It's a license that you have to have in Maryland to just be able to purchase a firearm from an FFL. And we're about to walk an 18-year-old kid through that process. It's issued by the Maryland State Police, and we're going to document the process all the way through up until it gets to that signing authority. And then if they reject him, I want to challenge that state policeman. I want to ask him, how do you feel about the, enforcing this unconstitutional law, right? And then just see if I could get him on the podcast. But it's something I plan on doing.
Well, things I'm old enough to remember when adulthood was 21. So if you have a problem with kids under 21 owning a handgun, then raise the legal adulthood age to 21 and be done with it.
Sure.
Make it consistent.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, Mark, as I mentioned, there's a few questions about fundamentals that I want to get to with you, because I think that starting at the fundamentals, if you break everything down by the fundamentals, oftentimes it's more absorbed, and you can really get down to what makes your training either similar or different from other people. And what I'd like to ask you is, when you send a firearm owner away from your class, right, when you've kind of deemed them worthy to go out and do great things with their firearms, what are the 3 fundamentals that you hope that you've given them, or that they've adopted through your training and through life of living, that they're going to carry with them?
Well, of course, number 1 is safety. That's absolutely top priority always. The thing that I see with most people is that where they get in trouble with it is inexperience. They purchase something for the first time, and you can teach them the 4 fundamental rules, during the whole class, and repeat it multiple times, but they don't always leave the room remembering it. It's not ingrained in them at that point. And the other thing that goes along with it is we've got so many people purchasing guns for the first time, and unfortunately, I see that most guys don't like to read instruction books, and I've had too many people come to the firing line without a fundamental idea of how that gun works. Able-bodied guys can't lock their slide open. They don't know where the safety is. They just simply don't know how to operate the thing. And that's where you got to teach them on the line. The next thing after that is you try to give them the good fundamentals of, in particular here, Minnesota state law. When deadly force is permitted, what's the rules around carrying, where you can carry, and so forth. And I spent an awful lot of time on the legal aspects of this. Use of force law, I've spent a lot of time studying independently, and most people have no clue. I'll have somebody in the class that has been through somebody else's program 5 years ago when they last had their permit done, and I start talking about this legal stuff, and their eyes get big as saucers because they have no idea about all of the things that they're responsible for when you're carrying a handgun on you.
So we got safety and legality. Did I miss the second one in there?
Fundamentals of actually understanding your gun.
Oh, understanding the firearm.
For understanding the firearm itself. I mean, it seems like it'd be a simple thing, but if handgun's not that complicated to operate, but when you ask somebody to lock their slide open for them and for me to show me it's clear, they don't know how to lock it open.
Right. So I'm gonna actually do something here, and you mentioned this, and I was hoping that you would, Mark. I'm gonna go ahead and share this screen here. I want to show the audience something here, guys. Again, if you're listening audio only, we encourage you to head over to the YouTube channel and see kind of what we're seeing over there. So I'm gonna go ahead and share a screen here. Give me 1 second. Let me share this screen. Right, so this is right from your website, Mark, and it's one of the things that drew me to interviewing you among the other instructors out in Minnesota, and it is because you focus a lot on the law. And right here on your website, right, I'm going to go ahead and highlight this for the people looking on the stream, right? Do you know what conditions must be present for you to even reach for your gun in self-defense? Hint, there are 5. What about drawing and presenting your gun? How about actually using it? Right. And then Mark here, again, for you audio only guys, has it kind of italicized in red. If you can't name these, you need this class. You must survive the physical attack, but then avoid potentially devastating legal problems that can follow. And that's why I was hoping that you would bring that up yourself, because it's something that I found intriguing about you. And it's something that I think is lacking in other, and I'm not going to call anybody out here, but it's something I've seen that's lacking in some of those run and gun, up jump, firearms instructors that are just trying to make a quick buck on the surge of firearms purchasing that we've witnessed over the past few years, is that they don't take the time to sit down with each other or sit down with their students and explain what the law says. Let me give you an example. So in Maryland, there's a large portion of the Maryland HQL and concealed carry, Maryland wear and carry permit training that is strictly on law. There's the DC law when you teach that class. There's all these little law segments. But what we've seen is, these people charging you $50. They'll go and they'll get their license. They'll charge you $50. You show up at their house for an hour, right? And then they just say, oh, don't worry about it. You're my buddy. You don't have to take the training. Or, oh, I'm in a hurry today. We're going to cut this short, right? And all this other stuff. And they're just out there trying to make a quick buck. And what they're doing is they're actually damaging their students, because their students don't have the information they need to appropriately defend themselves, not in the fight, but in the fight to follow whenever the cops show up. And that's something that I see that you're doing, is one of the reasons why I wanted to reach out to you, Mark, is because you do put a focus on law. Now, can you tell me, why did you choose to focus so much of your, ambition on the training on the law portion of it?
Well, number one, I want people to keep them out of trouble. I want to keep people out of trouble. I mean, most of the lawyers and folks that I follow and have been learning from on this tell me that the number one reason people get in trouble with the law isn't when they have to actually use the handgun, because they do something silly while they're carrying it around. They pull it and brandish it when they're not supposed to. You got somebody in traffic who's got a road rage thing happening, and you're waving the gun out the window trying to change somebody's attitude. That's gonna put you in jail. And it's simple things like this that people, well, for instance, I'll give you a good one. There's a lot of folks that are really big on open carry, and you can open carry in Minnesota. And I'm quite frankly very adamantly against it, because it just opens you up to problems. You're walking through Walmart, some soccer mom sees the gun, freaks out, calls 911. Next thing you know, you got a SWAT team showing up, and what are you supposed to do with that? Nobody needs to know you're carrying the gun. You're not carrying the gun to make a political statement. You're not carrying it to change anybody's attitude, to create some teachable moment with somebody. You're carrying it for one reason only, and that is to protect yourself and your family. And I would much rather have the tactical advantage of not having any, adversary, any company coming after me that doesn't know I'm armed. So I want that to be a surprise to them.
And those are all very good points. I talked to somebody the other day, and the guy's a badass, right? He's one of those guys, and that everybody knows this guy, and he, well deserved, right? This guy was a Army Special Forces. He's a pretty prolific instructor in the world of combat defensive training with firearms. But one of the things he asked when I was talking to him about open versus concealed carry was one of the reasons sometimes why he chooses to open carry is because he would rather the threat focus on him so that the people around him can escape, right? And that's not for everybody, and that takes a specific kind of person to kind of own that threat response. But he's like, man, I've got the training. I understand how to defend myself in a threat. I've taken so many different threat identification classes that I would rather an active shooter or somebody else, when they start to target people, see me with the gun and try to target me first. That way it gives other people a chance to escape. That's one way of looking at it. I agree with him. However, that's not my response, right? I would rather protect mine and protect myself than, draw the threat. And it's, I value life a little bit, and I don't want to take that risk. That's my perspective.
I would argue contrary to that, because if he's the target of the threat, he's the first one they're going to shoot. And so if he's got that level of training, and the person who's starting to shoot people, create an event, doesn't know he's there, doesn't know he's armed, gives him, I would think, a much better tactical advantage to take that guy out while he's not aware of his presence.
Yep, there's definitely that as well. Yeah, and I see that. But I'm a fan of my partner. It's ironic, right? So and maybe you act this way as well, and I'll end up asking you. But my buddy Ryan, the owner of Practical Training Professionals, he open carries everywhere he goes, and the reason that he does it is because in Maryland it's against the law to carry without a license, open or concealed. So what he does, it is one of those teachable moments, right? People will come up to him and be like, hey, you can't carry that firearm, right? And he'll be like, no, actually I can, and I could teach you how to do the same thing, right? So it's advertisement for him. Ironically, because Maryland is a may issue state, meaning that you have to have good and substantial reason for the state police to grant you a license to carry, not a lot of people have a concealed carry permit. And with that, it's not just a concealed carry permit, Mark, it's a wear and carry permit. So not a lot of people are carrying firearms on the street. So when law enforcement engages somebody and that person is lawful and they declare their firearm, a lot of times the law enforcement officers don't even know how to deal with it, right? So not only is, when Ryan carries, not only is it a teachable moment for a citizen sometimes. Last 2 weekends ago, we were down in Ocean City doing a training down there, and the Boardwalk police actually came up to him. They're like, whoa, you can't be carrying that. He's like, actually, I can, right? Here's my concealed carry permit and all this other stuff. It is a teachable moment for a young deputy as well. That's the reason why he chooses to open carry. I'm not a big open carry guy. Have you ever considered open carrying for advertisement or anything like that to get? No, not for you?
No. I know Minneapolis police officers. If you walk through Minneapolis, you will be stopped. And sure, you're going to show them your permits and you're going to be okay, but I don't need the hassle.
Sure.
And I've seen too many videos of people open carrying where bad guys come along, form a plan, and take it from them. The best one that I've shown in my classes is the guy at the fast food counter. He's open carrying. Some guy walks up right behind him, snatches it out of his holster, runs out the door. The guy goes and chases him, of course, and guess where this gun gets pointed is back at himself.
Sure.
I'm not an open carry guy. Again, for me, it's a tactical advantage that nobody around me knows. And besides all of that, when you think about it, probably 90% of the population is like what you said. They have no clue about carry laws.
That's right.
And so if I'm walking through some place, I'm perfectly legal, I'm doing everything right, but somebody who doesn't understand that calls the police, and then I've got to deal with it. And then there's the folks, too, that are actually doing the whole swatting thing on people. They'll call police and they'll lie to them and they'll tell them, well, this guy's threatening people with a gun. And then you really have to deal with the hassle.
Yeah.
So I'm not giving them that advantage. I'm not going to let the criminal know that I'm there with a weapon. And it's going to be for me to use when I desperately need it. So.
Yeah, I hear you. So you've been at this, you said, the better part of since about 2013. Let me ask you, this is something I kind of ask everybody because I want to get a feel I want to get a finger on the pulse around the country. What have you seen in the kind of quality and attitude of the students over the time that you have been instructing?
It varies quite a bit. You've got people who have had multiple permits, renewed multiple times, and they think they know how to do this. They don't need the training. They just are forced to sit through it because Minnesota doesn't have a renewal process. You've got to go through the whole thing just like you do the first time, every single time you do it. So they just kind of half bored sitting through the class and want to get through it as fast as they can. And those folks tend to be drawn towards the less expensive, shorter classes. But when I get some of those guys, sometimes I wake them up with illegal things, but sometimes I catch them too much time fiddling with their phone while I'm trying to teach them something. So there's that. You've got those that are brand new to this, which is a lot of them, and some of those are extremely interested in learning because they know they don't know anything, and so those are the ones I love because they're wide open, and you can pour it into them as fast as they can take it. A lot of them just don't know what they don't know, and I actually think I talk some of them out of it. When I get into the legal process, I've been known to say, look, if you're not second guessing whether or not you really want to do this, you're not taking it seriously enough. Because while, yeah, this is the only country in the world that allows you to do this, it also comes with a pretty big responsibility. And you better go into it with your eyes open and realize exactly what you're taking on.
That's right. So you touched on it there a little bit, but I was going to ask you next here, if you could pick the same student every day for the rest of your life, right? Like what characteristics would that student have?
Oh, well, besides having a hunger to learn as much as they can, somebody who's actually willing to practice afterwards. One of the types of students that I'll see is somebody who has had a permit before, perhaps had a gun for a while, but doesn't spend any time training. I'll ask them to come to the firing line. I'll ask them, when's the last time he got to shoot, especially if they have their own gun. And I've heard everything from, the week before, which is really great to hear because they've taken it seriously. I hear too many of them say, well, it's been 5 years since the last time I got my permit. So they've literally not fired the gun since the last time they qualified. And I had one guy come up to me one time. He said, yeah, the last time I shot was 40 years ago when I was in the military.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, what's the problem? Well, they'll give me the ammo shortage excuse, but come on, you haven't shot in 5 years? Come on.
Have you adopted, and this is, with technology, right, with the advances in technology, we're seeing a lot of those advances in the firearms industry as well. And I recently got my hands on a dry fire system for the AR-15 platform and having a blast with that thing. But do you use dry fire techniques like for yourself at home to practice?
Yes.
Because there is a cost of ammunition and it is going up. And for, 223 where we're at, it's about 50 cents a round. That's a lot of money.
You're getting it cheap.
Well, I've seen it go all the way up to about $1 in certain areas.
Yeah.
But it's, to even do like a 5-round grouping, you're at $2.50, and then you try to zero off that grouping and it's like you're, $30, $40 every time just to get your rifle sighted in. That's a lot of money that a lot of people don't have. So with the advent of technology, we're seeing a lot more people try to adopt some of these, technologies for dry fire training. Do you try to, is that an option that you try to give your classes? Like do you, when you send them away, do you say, hey, maybe you guys should look into this or anything like that?
Yes, absolutely. It's very simple because you can buy a laser cartridge for your gun, maybe $60, $70, and you can get an app on your phone for a few bucks that will give you a timer and show you where the shot lands. It's that simple. Now, if you want to get into more advanced things, there's obviously other programs out there available for that. But yes, I do encourage a dry fire for people because in a concealed carry class, I can't really spend a lot of time teaching people how to draw. And that's one of the more dangerous things that people can get into if you haven't got any training in it. So put a laser cartridge in the gun, put a target on the wall, and set up a cheap timer if you can, and practice simple motions getting it out of the holster.
That's right.
Clearing the garment, Try different holster positions, especially if somebody's into an off-body carry thing. There's so many ladies into this now. I mean, and they're not coming with their husbands and boyfriends. They're coming by themselves. And so they need to be able to find a way that works for them. And if you're going to do a belly band or a purse carry or something like this, you need to practice getting that gun out. And doing it with a laser cartridge keeps it safe, so they don't have to be concerned about getting themselves in trouble. And especially you can do it in your own home.
That's right.
So you can play around with things often as you want to, try different stuff, and then when you think you've got it figured out, take it to a range that'll let you do that. And then you can begin to do the dry fire after you've got some muscle memories built and some techniques down that you know you can do safely.
Absolutely. That's the fundamental stuff. You don't have to train just squeezing that trigger. And you can train squeezing the trigger at home safely, right? Just make sure your weapon's cleared and all that stuff. But it's the motions, right? It's the practice of just drawing that firearm because, you know, I was in the military, and all my business associates here at the range, we all served in the military, and you know, the best training you can get is under duress, because then those moments, you know, whenever a stressful situation pops up and your adrenaline is flowing, your muscle memory kicks in, right? That's when your training kicks in because you're not thinking clearly. And that's what I try to tell everybody out, you know, when they come for their 1-day training for HQL or their 2-day training for Maryland Wear and Carry, is it doesn't stop here, right? Just because you have the license, this isn't where it stops, because when it's 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and you're safely asleep in your bed at night, right? And next thing you know, you hear the door getting kicked down, people screaming, kids screaming. You can't remember the freaking finger combination to your lock next to your bed. You're panicking. Are you going to be able to safely execute, firing that firearm, you know, and eliminating that threat under duress? And most of the time we're like, shit, I never even thought about it that way. It's like, well, that's what you got to do. You got to think about it, you know? And one of the ways to get there is repetitive motion, drawing from, you know, your appendix, drawing from off body, drawing from strong body, drawing from wherever you're at, reholstering, right? Walking around with your firearm, picking up your sight picture, all those different things that you can do without spending any money. You can do all that stuff at home. So we're big advocates of the dry fire type stuff and then those kind of training methods. And I'm glad to hear that you recommend that to your students as well. I have one more question here I wanted to get, actually two, but I've got one more question here I wanted to get to you before I cut you out, is this. So this podcast is about forming a community of, you know, potential, you know, students seeking out trainers, but also other trainers looking to improve their game. And there is a mutual respect among firearms trainers and instructors that come on the podcast. And what I would like to ask you, Mark, is there anybody else in Minnesota that you would say, maybe if you can't make it down to Minneapolis, maybe go check out this guy? And I'm not asking you to promote your competition here or anything like that, but who do you think else in Minnesota has the trust of Mark to maybe teach somebody?
That's a good question. Honestly, maybe the best guy that I know of is also my attorney. He owns the guy's name is Jim Fleming. He owns a training business in Monticello, a little bit north of the Twin Cities. He's also an ex-police officer. He's got 10 years experience in that. And, being 30 years as a criminal defense attorney. So he has this covered from all aspects. And he's written a book, which I've read as well, and that's where some of my legal information has come. He's very good in the sense that he's got all of those aspects covered, you know, because again, so many people, think that they can just take the carry class and then they're good to go. And I so much tell them that this has to be the first class you take, not the last one. You got to keep going here, because it's one thing to stand at the range and shoot bullseyes at a static target that's not firing back at you. You know, you've got to go from that to be able to be putting multiple rounds on target, multiple rounds on multiple targets, and all of the different dynamics that come into place. And you can't get that out of a concealed carry class. Sure. So you've got to keep going. And this is one of the things that he does. He does quite well too. So,
Very cool. And my next question is something that I ask, and not everybody has a good answer for this one, but I'm going to hit you with it anyways. What is the next class that Mark is taking?
Next class that Mark is taking. Well, that's a tough one because they've all been shut down around here.
Bastards.
Yeah. Well, you live in a probably as bad a liberal cesspool as I do.
Yes, it is. It is definitely a blue state, but we are a very red county where I live.
Yeah, well, that's not the case for where I am. Um, what I would like to do is get out to some place like Gunsight.
Yeah.
One of those multiple days, locations where you can really get into it.
Okay.
And that hasn't been possible with all the stuff that's been going on lately. And be able to kind of get into a total immersion kind of thing. I spend multiple days just doing nothing but study and shoot and practice techniques and learn from people who know a whole lot more than I do.
Absolutely. And it's our duty, right? Isn't it, to continue to stay up on the latest and greatest, kind of training methods and make sure that we're improving ourselves and, learn something new. It's one of the favorite things that I've kind of picked up here throughout doing this podcast for the past few weeks is this. I don't know it all, right? I'm here to learn just as much as anyone else is, right? And the more people I talk to, the more insight I get. And as I mentioned in an email, and something that Matt Watson mentioned the other day was one of the 3 things that he wishes that people paid more attention to, and it really hit home with me. So that's why I don't mind repeating it here, because I think it should hit home with everybody, is that, and you mentioned it from one area, right? What happens after you squeeze the trigger from a legal perspective. But what he looked at was what happens after you squeeze the trigger from kind of an emotional perspective, right? Like, are you going to be able to live with yourself after you do that? Is there going to be some PTSD? Are you okay with living the rest of your life knowing that you killed somebody? Stuff like that. It's a very heavy situation, and there's a lot of brevity associated with that. And it's something that in the military, right, it was given, right? It's just understood that this is your job. But in the civilian world, there's a lot of people, hairy homeowners and, happy housewives that in a situation, life or death situation, they defend themselves, Have they considered the fact that you have to live with yourself afterward? And you approach that from a slightly different angle where it's like, make sure you understand after you squeeze that trigger that the fight literally has just begun. Now you've got the legal stuff to deal with. And there's also this emotional stuff. And that's why I like talking to all you guys, because I, learn a lot throughout all of this, and it really helps me put things into perspective. Things I thought were normal and everybody knew. No, that's not the case, right? We all have something to learn.
Another side of that I do bring up in my classes as well is that when I'm talking about if it comes to using your firearm in self-defense, where actually to place your shots, it's like, ask yourself, are you actually going to be able to do this? Can you pull the trigger on another human being? And you can't practice that, obviously.
Right.
So what you have to be able to do is you're going to have to do some mental exercises and think of, okay, if somebody comes in my home, here's the steps I'm going to take. Here's where my gun is. Here's who's going to take the call to make 911. Who's going to get the kids and bring them where? Who's going for the gun? Where's all this going to go? But while you're running that scenario, can you actually visualize yourself pulling the trigger on somebody who's trying to hurt your family? You all sit in a class and think in a perfectly safe environment thinking, well, of course I could do that. Of course I'm going to defend my family. But it's a whole different animal when you have to actually do it.
Yep.
And there's really very, very few instructors out there who've actually been there and done that.
That's right.
And so you got to ask yourself that question. And if you don't figure it out ahead of time, under that stress, you're not going to be able to answer it.
That's right.
Like you said, you're gonna default to your highest level of training, not what you're not going to rise to anything. So you have to have spent the time and thought it through, and made that decision up front. It's like for me in a mass shooting situation. If I was ever to be in one of those, I've made the default decision for myself to get me and my family out of there. My purpose is to defend me and my family. Now, if I'm backed into a corner, then I'm going to act, of course. But playing the hero in a mass shooting situation can get you killed, as it did with one guy here not too long ago who was shot by police who thought he was the mass killer. And people don't realize that, especially guys, sometimes they want to think of themselves as going to be a hero at some point. And that's all great, but realize what you're getting into here. What if you miss? What if you hit an innocent person? What if you're facing a civil lawsuit now? What if another concealed carrier who's not have as much training as you do thinks you're the shooter while you're engaging the shooter? There's a lot of risk involved here that you don't know about. And I've heard people say that, look, if I'm all alone, I'll engage, but if my family's with me, then I'm going to run away, take them with me, But realize too, if you're alone and you have a family and you don't survive that fight, then you've just left them without you.
That's right.
So it's not just about me, it's about my family, it's about my friends, it's about people in my church, everybody else is depending on me. My job is for me to survive and to survive with my family. And if I have an opportunity to help somebody, it's not off the table, but it's not my default. I'm not going to go running into something without thinking about it.
Absolutely. Well, Mark, we're coming up on time here, so I want to go ahead and say this right now. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy life to come on the show, spread your wisdom and knowledge and years of experience here with our audience. I look forward to possibly meeting you in the future. I know you said you want to get out to a good gun range and maybe take yourself some immersive training. We're looking at going to this place called Front Sight out in Vegas sometime in January. So maybe we can meet you up down there. So I know I'm not sponsored by them or anything like that. I've never even been, but I was recently gifted a membership there. And I think once you get a membership, you're a lifetime member and you can go to any of their classes forever for free. So I'm really looking forward to that. However, it's a couple thousand miles away from where I live. So plane tickets are going to get expensive for training.
I'm a little closer, but it's not that close. And then there's the 1,000, 1,200 rounds of 9mm you're going to have to go through while you're out there. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll see you again in person. We're also planning on attending a SHOT Show in January. It's going to be a big show out in Las Vegas also if they don't corona everything again. So, but we're optimistic there as well. So again, Mark, thank you. It's been my pleasure and my honor, sir, to have you come on the show and share your wisdom with us. And wishing you all the best in your endeavor, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. And with that, we're out. Thank you.